this episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Hello everybody. Welcome to another episode. This is the first one of 2023. This is a really short episode. We are going to talk about DA, but I'm also just wanting to lay the foundations of what you're going to expect over the next few months of this podcast. So, Happy New Year, because it is the first time that I've done one this year. I know we are now in February, so I don't even think that you should be saying Happy New Year, but there you go. If you have stumbled across this podcast for the very first time, you are very, very welcome. I hope that you get something out of it. Please do listen to some previous episodes. Those that are joining me again, thank you. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you that you are engaged in the process to be able to understand more about how we can support those survivors. And to those people that have reached out, to you amazing, brave, strong, courageous individuals that have reached out. I am so glad to be one of many positive voices, to be able to be that voice for you, to stand up, to advocate, to challenge where necessary, in order that survivors are seen and they are heard and they are believed. I have appreciated your messages. I have appreciated your support. So thank you very, very much for listening, because I know it can be really quite difficult. So you are all amazing, and it's not been an easy journey. I know that. But there are brighter days coming. So anyway, let's just kind of move on before I get emotional. But actually, I guess that it's sad that we have to do these podcasts. It's sad that we have to have organisations that are supporting people that are affected by abuse. Because if I had any control at all, the one thing, well, there'd be several things, but the one thing that I would eradicate is violence. Violence towards another human being. Like sometimes humans are just the worst. And my hope and my dream is that one day there won't be a need for me or for my, colleagues in other professions that are really raising the flag and moving forward with this agenda about, domestic abuse and sexual violence, because, we shouldn't have to put up with it. We shouldn't have to endure it. We shouldn't have to experience it. And no should be our no, and our yes should be our yes. And our boundaries should be respected. And we live in a world where that appears not to be the case. But it's not all doom and gloom, because there are amazing people out in the world. There are a few bad rotten apples, but there are some amazing people that will fight for you and stand up for you, and that will, walk with you and carry you if necessary, to where you need to be in life. So anyway, this is just going to be a really, really quick kind of overview. I've got some amazing things planned. We've got some really exciting podcasts that are coming up. We're going to be looking at economic abuse in more details. So what does that look like? What does that mean? Economic and financial abuse is one of the reasons why survivors stay in relationships longer than they want to, in some cases. So we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at amazing organisations that can help and support and what that looks like. We are going to, and I'm really excited about this one, but we're going to be speaking to organisations that deliver perpetrator programs. I know that survivors are listening. I also know that it's likely that, people who are exhibiting behaviours that is not acceptable in relationships may also be listening. And actually, for those people, that are recognising that there's some issues with their behaviours and they want to change, there's some amazing organisations that really support those people in order to change their behaviours for the benefit of survivors. So that's not to endorse or condone abusive behaviour in any way, shape or form. And, it is very much about the survivors being at the forefront of that. So that's going to be really exciting. We're going to have some deep conversations about that and what that looks like. We're going to really kind of nail down on some really topical subjects. We're going to kind of explore marginalised communities such as the LGBTQ plus community. We're going to be looking at the Black and minoritized communities and why what support is available for those individuals. So we've got some exciting things coming up. So that, keep your ears out for that. That will be really awesome. But today I'm just going to, literally, remind everybody about domestic abuse. This is a podcast that is about abuse. And so I don't think that you would expect any less that there won't be something in relation to that. So next couple of minutes, I just really want to explore what are the challenges and barriers that survivors face when they disclose abuse or prevents them from disclosing abuse. I think that, in my experience, personally and professionally, there's a number of reasons why people do not disclose abuse. There's a number of challenges that are involved in that, and the perpetrator of abuse tries to do a really good job of limiting agency for the survivor. One, to be able to recognise that the relationship is abusive in the first place, and that if you're convinced that your relationship is not abusive and your perpetrator is causing you serious harm, and physical, emotional or sexual, is telling you that their behaviour is okay, and then they're using the other tactics that we've explored in one of the other previous episodes around gaslighting and love bombing, that can be a really confusing time. So sometimes one of the very first barrier is to recognise that the relationship is abusive, and we justify and we minimise behaviours often, because we don't want to admit to ourselves that our relationship is anything less than perfect, let alone being able to disclose that to another person. So the first barrier is often denial. We also tend to turn away from the internal alarm system. So we're very good at making decisions based on our head logic and our heart logic, our emotional logic. But we often run away from our gut instinct. It's called a gut instinct for a reason, because that is if you were to come on any of my training, you would know that, like, I talk about three brains, and the third brain being your stomach. That's where trauma tends to lie. That's where your internal alarm system is that it's like something's not right, something doesn't feel right. We get that feeling, but then we minimize and we deny that that feeling's even there. And then we, like, we go through a storm, we go through a big massive wave, if you like, and then we go, really? I should have listened. I should have listened because I knew something wasn't right. So it's that gut instinct, and we don't want to listen to that sometimes because that's the most uncomfortable. It's like, oh, 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 I might have to do something there. So that's often the first barrier. The next barrier is the fear of retaliation. So many survivors will fear that by disclosing the abuse will lead to further violence or retaliation from the abuser. The a punishment for speaking out. If somebody has found that courage and that bravery to leave, the fear of being tracked down or traced in any way, they may be very reluctant to report the abuse because of, let's face it, lack of understanding from professionals or a dismissing of attitude. They may have had some previous really bad experiences with the police, for example. So there may be some barriers in reporting to police. They might not trust police. And unfortunately, if you're listening in the UK, we know we've got a lot of problems with particular police officers who are using their positions of power in order to, who are employed to protect and serve, but use that power in order to continue to harm, abuse, rape, and murder within this role of protecting and serving. So that may be another reason why people don't want to report the abuse to the police, because they think, well, I'm not going to get help here. That there's a lack of trust within that, and if somebody is in a relationship or married to somebody within the criminal justice system, actually, what is that going to look like for that person? So let's say that the perpetrator is a police officer, for example. Who am I going to report to if my partner is a police officer? Who am I going to report that? Because actually, are the police going to keep me safe? Because my husband works for them, for example. So there's a whole load of reasons which I think are manifesting even more at the moment about why people are not disclosing. Not being believed, I think, is another one. The perpetrator would have done a really successful job of or at least trying to convince the survivor that they're not going to be believed. They will say that you're crazy or making it up or that you're mental. In my experience, yes, there are some people that may make some allegations that may not be as factually as correct. However, I want to kind of caveat that with it's very, very few. If somebody is disclosing sexual violence, domestic abuse, it is a minuscule amount of people that would make that up, in my experience. So if somebody is saying that they're being sexually harassed at work, somebody is saying that they've been touched inappropriately, if somebody is saying, my husband took my keys last night on purpose, if somebody is saying I don't have access to my bank account, then we should be believing them, because another reason why people don't disclose is shame and guilt around that, and they blame themselves for the abuse that they're enduring. So to even admit that abuse is even a factor, or that somebody has been sexually assaulted or physically attacked in any way, shape or form is going to take a lot of courage and a lot of bravery because there is so much shame attached to it. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's highly unlikely that somebody is just going to make that up. And so we need to be believing our victims more. They might not. Maybe another reason is that they're not getting the adequate support from their friends or family. They might be skeptical about their narration of events. They may be very aligned to the perpetrator. They may have some difficulties within, their family or friend dynamic, or for any other reasons. So there may be inadequate support from friends and family, and that may even be perpetrated by deliberately being isolated from friends and family. So relationships have been broken down as an effect of what the perpetrator has done. So they would have tactically destroyed relationships. So reaching out to friends or family may be really quite difficult. I've already mentioned around shame and stigma. It does. And, it takes a long time for people to believe that they're not responsible for the abuse that they have experienced. I spend a lot of my time, having the same conversations about this is not your fault. And, there is nothing that somebody can say to me that can justify somebody else physically chastising or sexually abusing another individual. That behaviour lies solely with the perpetrator who is doing the abuse. And so because people are wrapped up in these feelings of blaming themselves, that can prevent a survivor from reaching out or seeking help or making that first phone call to an organisation. All of those feelings of, am I going to be believed? Am I going to be dismissed? Actually, what's going to happen if I do disclose? Are they going to call the police? All of these fears and thoughts that go running through a head that stop somebody from making that phone call or going into an organisation asking for support or help. And so I've already mentioned about financial dependence. Sometimes we don't have the means to be able to leave a relationship, and we're going to look at that more in depth. What does that actually look like? It could be that fear of not having an income because we're relying on the other person's income. Often very complex legal processes. Court cases can take a long time. There is a lot of victim blaming that happens within that. Other cases being heard in the media, for example, and seeing the treatment of the survivor, puts people off reporting. It can be very intimidating, speaking to a police officer. No matter how nice they are, it can be extremely intimidating. If you've ever been in a courtroom, they're not nice places. They're often very dark. They're often very old buildings. They often tend to be really big places, which can be really quite scary. And then if you are in a courtroom, and you haven't been told about, what special measures can be put in place so you do not have to see your perpetrator, then that may be a reason why somebody doesn't want to report or wants to continue along the justice system, because they don't know that the courts can actually help minimise the impact that the perpetrator has on them. And it can often lead to uncertainty around, well, how long is this going to be? Another reason would be, actually, I don't want to be re-traumatized. Like, how many times have I got to tell my story? I've told my domestic abuse worker, I've told social services, I've told the police. Now I've got to stand up in court, and now I've got to justify ourselves. And in the previous episodes, you look at the effects of trauma. And so sometimes what we know about trauma is that it can skew memories. That's not to say that the memories are incorrect. The timeline can just be a little bit off because of the trauma. And so if you've got the perpetrator's solicitor or barrister that's trying to undermine your credibility, that can be scary. But what I want to say, just to those survivors that are listening, that are considering reporting, not all police are bad, so no matter what the media tells you, but equally, you get equipped, get to know your local domestic abuse organisation, because they will really, really help you. They will offer you emotional support. They will walk the justice system with you. They will walk that path with you. You do not have to do it by yourself. They are very knowledgeable. They will be able to understand that legal process. They'll be able to take the legalese out of all of the jargon, out of any court papers. So please, 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 I would always advocate to report to police, but align yourself with an IDVA or a domestic abuse organisation at the same time, because it can be quite a scary place. And I want you to know that there is support for you within that process. So please don't let that be a barrier to justice being served for you towards your perpetrator, because as much as it is difficult, actually it's not impossible, and there will be there are consequences for behaviour that is abusive. So please, please, please don't sit there and think, I'm not going to report, I don't want to do this, or anything that I might have just said that's like, no, she's just told me don't do it. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is it can be scary, but if you are aligned with the right people that are able to support and navigate that with you, then they will do that with you and for you. So do not let that be a barrier to you, reporting your truth to the criminal justice system. Okay. And I know, it can be overwhelming, but like I said, there are some amazing IDVAs out there. There are and amazing organisations that are very, very, very equipped to be able to work with survivors of abuse. They understand it. So please, I can't stress enough, don't let that be a barrier. And if you don't want to report to your friends or family or even the police, but you want to speak to somebody in confidence, again, get in touch with your local DA agency. Depending on where you are, in the UK, you can just do a quick Google search. You've got the National Domestic Helpline, which would have been on one of the intros that before you've listened to this episode. There are organisations within your area. If you're listening overseas, and welcome to everyone that's listening overseas, I see you. I see where you're listening from. So welcome. Get in touch with your country's local domestic abuse organisation around that. Okay. So I know that it's almost like it's like a really negative, and I don't want it to be a negative episode. It is more around understanding really why people don't report the abuse. Now, all of those challenges can be overcome, and that's the positive, is that we're in our minds. As somebody that's experiencing domestic abuse, in our minds, we put all these challenges and barriers. Actually, there is a solution to every single one of those barriers if you reach out. And that can be the hardest thing sometimes, is making that first step. Sometimes we make it bigger in our head, but the minute that we start, the minute that we put one foot in another, we're moving. We're walking. It's like a baby. It's like, once it's made its first steps and it's like, not falling down on its knees, it gets up and that child that baby, that toddler is going. And that's the same. So, get up, put one foot in front of the other and watch yourself walk, because you will walk. So very quick episode. One, really just to kind of say hello. Two, to kind of let you know where we're at. Three, to thank everybody that's listening. And four, just to kind of like end on like this. Well, why are survivors? Why is it so difficult for survivors? Like I said, I want to end by saying I see you and I hear you, and we are there. All you need to do is give us a call, because we're going to be there at the other end waiting for that call to be able to walk the next bit with you. All right, thank you. And I'll be back again in a couple of weeks with some really exciting guests. And you've just listened to this week's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation this week. Feel free to like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out, and I'll see you next time.